Hello and welcome to another edition of Land of 10 Live. I'm Sam Radin along with former Michigan Wolverine great and 1997 national champion Chris Howard. Looking forward to chopping up another week of Big Ten football with you. How you doing, my man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Excited. Big Ten is rolling. Some excitement happening in the Big Ten, so let's get to it.
Well, and you got to like it because now the Michigan schedule's coming back relevant again. But I'll tell you, before we get to the Michigan Wolverines, we got to talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes. And Ohio State, again, the story of the Big Ten this week, not from the embarrassing loss they had the week before, but from the humiliation that they doled out to Michigan State.
Yeah, J.T. Barrett, I mean, he really bounced back with his performance. The defense bounced back from a poor performance against Iowa. So, I mean, this is what you expect, right? You expect a team like Ohio State to, rally around the troops, get the team together, and then really come back out and have a great performance like they did against Michigan State. And
now it's Ohio State and no longer Michigan State that controls its own fate to play for the Big Ten championship coming out of the Big Ten East. The other side of that ledger, of course, is the Wisconsin Badgers and how they continue to dominate the opposition in the Big Ten West. And they're showing that their defense is really rounding into form to go along with that running game as they continue to march their way on to a division champion.
Yeah, I don't think Wisconsin's defense get enough credit for what they do. I mean, they really held a quarterback like Stanley to, I think, 41 yards passing, no touchdowns, one interception. Wisconsin defense, again, is one of the best defense in the Big Ten, and I don't think they get enough credit for that.
Well, at this point, for better or worse, I guess Penn State's kind of played itself out of maybe the prominent role of the Big Ten East, but still having a season that a lot of their fans are successful or feeling successful about, and they take out a little bit of their aggression on Rutgers, although not really the same Saquon Barkley that we saw at the beginning of the season, even against, obviously, a subpar defensive team.
Yeah, I mean, this game was really about McSorley. He's done an outstanding job of controlling offense. He's bounced back from a couple weeks of bad performances, but he's been playing really well. I'm really surprised, obviously, at Saquon Barkley. He's really been non-existent for the last few games, so I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, Saquon Barkley's stats are something that we'll spend some time talking about over the course of the rest of this program, and then obviously into the foreseeable future as we get closer toward NFL draft season. Another story that continues to kind of permeate through the Big Ten this year has been just the abysmal performances that Nebraska's been turning in. We talked a little bit about Mike Riley and his fate with the Cornhuskers at the end of the season in last week's show, and he didn't do anything to kind of shut us up from that conversation after another drubbing, this time at the hands of Minnesota.
Yeah, it's really the end of the Riley experiment. He just hasn't done enough to really instill any confidence from the fan base, from the administration. I think it's really just time to kind of move on from Mike Riley. It's unfortunate. He's a great coach, but it is what it is. This is college football, and at the end of the day, you are measured by the performances and the wins.
Yeah, the wins and losses are not doing the trick right now for Mike Riley at Nebraska. And look, when you give up in the 50s, a half hundred to Minnesota, a Minnesota offense that looked pretty anemic against Michigan, who we'll talk about next here as the Wolverines keep rolling, I think that's probably a sign of things to come from Mike Riley. But speaking of Michigan, it's now 3 straight wins in convincing fashion. I don't know, though, when you look at the opponents, the level of competition they're playing, does that have something to do with it for the Wolverines?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I look at what Michigan has done the last couple games. They've run the ball extremely well. Brandon Peters has been a great game manager. He's been doing his job. He hasn't been turning the ball over. Michigan's running game has just been outstanding the last few weeks. But again, you have to keep everything in perspective. It was against Maryland. It was against Minnesota. It was against Rutgers. We'll know exactly how dominant Michigan is in the next couple weeks.
Well, in those couple weeks, as you talk about, we got Wisconsin for Michigan coming up this week, and then obviously the rivalry game against Ohio State. Yeah. Speaking of Ohio State and the Michigan rivalry, a guy that knows a lot about that is a guy that went to your high school. Jonathan Wells, a former Ohio State Buckeye, joins us here. And Chris, I know you're excited to talk to a guy that had to follow in your footsteps there in Louisiana.
Yeah, he followed, but didn't follow them enough. He went to Ohio State, but I don't hold that against him, though.
Well, we get an opportunity to speak with Jonathan now, and I guess, Jonathan, the first thing to talk about is the inconsistent play of Ohio State over the course of the past couple weeks. What have you seen out of the Buckeyes that makes them have such ups and downs this season?
Man, honestly, man, that Iowa game it's just one of those games where you have that type of day. You come out, you throw a pick six on the first play of the game, and that kind of just set the tone for the rest of the day. We just didn't play up the standard, and in football, it happens. You know what I mean? But other than that, I think we've been fairly consistent. We've been playing really well. Other than that one game and the Oklahoma game, they came in and put it on us as well. But that's a part of the deal. We had a very young wide receiver core coming into the season. None of those guys had any experience. So I expected for us to take a little bit of time to get into a rhythm passing the ball. And, once we got into that rhythm, we've been okay since then. They've been doing okay.
Awesome. Jonathan, real quick, I want to ask you a question. JT Barrett, a lot of it has been made about his performance over the last, couple weeks, whether or not he's been consistent enough. But, I mean, if you go back and really look at his record, look at what he's done, he's been outstanding. And the one thing about JT Barrett is he's a veteran. He runs this team, but he's been getting a lot of flack about not being consistent in big games. I've even seen you a couple of times talk about JT Barrett. What have you seen that gives you a little bit more confidence in JT Barrett running his team?
Well, I don't have any doubts that JT Barrett is one of the best leaders Ohio State has ever had at the quarterback position. I would have loved to play with the guy. I mean, he's 64% in his career. He's passed for almost 9,000 yards, 99 touchdowns. I mean, there's not a lot to complain about. Listen, football is a team sport. And if your offensive line is not giving you time sometimes, and then your receivers can't get away from one-on-one coverage, what are you supposed to do? Sometimes it just happens like that. I think J.T. Barrett has had an excellent career at Ohio State. Now, can he be better? Of course. But I don't have too many complaints about the way J.T. Barrett has handled his business. I mean, he's won over 30 games as a starter at Ohio State. It's not too much you can complain about. Football is a team sport. And also, I think sometimes the offensive coordinators put him in a bad situation because we don't stick to what Ohio State football is, which is running the football. For instance, we played against Iowa. Both of our running backs had a combined 11 carries. Like, come on, we can't win football games like that. So Kevin Wilson has to do a better job of running the football. That makes it a lot easier on the quarterback position, as you know, Chris.
Well, and that's the thing, Jonathan, is that's been a criticism over the past couple of years of Urban Meyer and the handling of the running game at Ohio State. When you look at the talent they've had, Ezekiel Elliott not getting enough carries at times, and now you talk about Mike Weber and the running game they have now, what kind of advice would you give to the offensive coaching staff at Ohio State to utilize that running game?
Run the football, man. Y'all know what we do up here in Buckeye Land. Get the ball to the running backs. Listen, the Ohio State offense, we've had great wide receivers throughout our history, but this offense runs through the running back. Let's be clear. Listen, you got a freshman, J.K. Diamonds, who came out the gate, shot out of the gate out of nowhere, who's incredible. You got a redshirt sophomore who's come back, who's rushed for over 1,200 yards last year as a freshman. Like, come on, let these guys carry the load. They're not going to be able to stop our running game, and we're consistent. Every time we don't get the ball to the running back, 2015, Ezekiel Elliott, we didn't give him the ball, we lost to Michigan State. Same thing when we lost in the Big Ten Championship to Michigan State in 2013. Listen, the formula is run the football. Nobody can stop the run against us consistently when we do that.
I agree, Jonathan, and I'll even use Michigan as an example. Last year, in each of Michigan's losses, they averaged 2.1 yards a carry. If you don't run the ball well, you will lose the game. And every time Ohio State has gotten away from running the ball, they lost the game.
Yeah, totally agree. So, it's very, as a running back, it's very frustrating for me. I was actually at the game in 2015. I had 50-yard line seats. I'm in a great spot. They didn't give the ball to him in the first half. I left the game. I'm like, dude, we're going to lose. This is not going to work. If they're going to continue to do this, we have no shot tonight. And exactly what happened, we lost on a last-minute field goal. Man, feed the beast, man. That's what running backs at Ohio State come here to do. We come here to set the tone and make sure that we get out of here to win. J.T. Barrett is great, but I'm not going to put him before that running game. Let's be clear.
Hey, Jonathan, the graphic we have up for you right now is the running back that broke the curse versus Michigan. That was, of course, the Jim Tressel-led team. Think back on your experiences with Coach Tressel and what kind of comparisons can you draw between the teams that you played for with him and then looking at what Ohio State's doing right now with Urban Meyer?
Well, I can't make any comparisons because we suck when I was there, let's be clear. But as far as the big game, Tressel was very unique in the fact that he made that game totally special from the first day that he stepped on campus. Like, we used to watch film on Michigan started in spring football. We had never done that with John Cooper. Like, we used to watch it all spring, all summer. It was always something around that building about the game. That's what really changed the title. So by the time we got to the game, to be honest, I was sick and tired of hearing about Michigan. I'm like, man, listen, we got to go out here and get a win because, you know, we had came close my sophomore year. We lost by 7 to Tom Brady. They came back and beat us. And then my senior year, I'm like, I'm not leaving out of here without a victory. And, you know, from that day on, it's been, I think, we're, 14-2 in the rivalry. So, yeah, it's definitely the day that we broke the curse. I definitely believe that.
Jonathan,
Chris,
you just had to bring that up.
Bring that 14-2
had to bring that up, man.
I'm just giving the facts, brother. That's all. Listen, because I know you weren't hesitant to give the facts in the 90s, were you?
Listen, but what happens between me and you and we say between each other, that's between me and you, brother.
Got you. Yeah.
Well, I'll delve into that personal relationship a little bit. How about Jonathan following in Chris's footsteps in high school? How many times did you hear, well, Chris Howard did it this way, and why don't you do it more like Chris Howard did it? What was that kind of thing you guys heard?
Listen, Chris Howard made me the beast that I am today. When I walked on campus at John Curtis as a young 8th grade snotty-nosed kid who didn't know anything, him and my man Kevin Dukes were my heroes. They were everything. I mean, I've seen this man rush for over 300 yards in a game. I've seen Kevin Dukes rush for 300 yards in a game. The things that they did in high school, you didn't have a choice but to be great coming behind them. So that was just the expectation I had. This is the way my big dogs did it, and we're going to continue the tradition. We won our last 2 state championships my junior and senior year, and from that point we went to 19 championships in a row. So I take a lot of pride in leaving that championship DNA that Chris and Kevin instilled in me. So Chris was a huge influence on my game in high school. I looked up to this guy and still do.
A pretty good run of championship performances right there for John Carroll High School. Or John Curtis High School, I should say.
John Curtis, don't do that.
So, I don't want to get you wrong. I don't want to get you wrong. Hey, before I let you go, Jonathan, I know that a lot of Ohio State fans are out there. They want to know what you're up to right now and where we can follow you on social media.
I'm on Instagram at jwellsmediagroup.com and then also just on LinkedIn. I haven't really been on social media. I actually just created an Instagram page maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe. Just been laying low, just graduated from Ohio Media School for TV and radio broadcasting and also film. So I'm launching a production company up in Cleveland right now that's going to be focused on documentaries, sports reality shows, and some other TV content type of things. So I'll definitely keep you guys posted on when I launch my first project.
That sounds great, man. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Oh, man, appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you.
Jonathan Wells, former Ohio State running back, the running back that broke the curse, if you will. Now, is there a curse when it comes to the Big Ten and trying to make it to the college football playoff? I don't know. I think the hopes of the Big Ten right now hang on the Wisconsin Badgers, and their pounding of Iowa last week was probably an emphatic, hey, we're still here, to the committee.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Iowa had, pretty much destroyed Ohio State in a big game. But of course, Iowa's a great team when they're at home, but on the road, they're not that great of a team. Stanley did not have a good game. I think he threw for about 40 plus yards. He had an interception. Just was not a great game overall. The only points that Iowa got was literally off of 2 interceptions to the same guy, to Josh Jackson. So, it's one of those things where Wisconsin, again, is the most balanced team in the Big Ten. Now, I do have questions about the quarterback, Hornibrook, because he has turned the ball over a lot. But again, when Wisconsin is being Wisconsin, behind that defense, they're very hard to beat.
Why do you think that is? I know we want to spend some time in Wisconsin, but just quickly in Iowa, why do you think that is that Iowa's not the same team home and road? I mean, Kirk Ferentz is renowned as a good motivator and a good coach and getting more out of less. Why does that happen to them?
Well, again, if you go back to looking at, what happened against, against Ohio State, right? The previous week, JT Barrett plays the game of his life, right? Iowa, Nate Stanley, he comes, he plays the game of his life. It's a huge emotional game. So you got to think that there was some sort of emotional letdown going into playing against Wisconsin. Very hard to string together two back-to-back great performances like that against great teams.
When you talk about Wisconsin and maybe some of the things holding them back right now from being one of those top four to make it into the playoffs, you talk about Hornibrook's play at quarterback. This team, it's crazy how often they turn over the football. I think they're in obviously the bottom quarter of the country in turnovers and turnover margin. How do they win despite turning the ball over so much?
Great defense. Again, you go back and look at Hornibrook, he's thrown 17 touchdowns with 12 interceptions. But again, they haven't paid for it because, one, they're in the Big Ten West. They're not really playing against teams that's going to really challenge them. And, of course, they've got a great defense. And then you couple that with them having an excellent run game, running behind, the freshman running back. That's going to help you solve a lot of your turnover issues when you have a great defense and you can get behind a running back that can rush for over 130 yards a game.
You're talking about Jonathan Taylor, running back. It's interesting because in a lot of respects, you got that formula with the ball control type of offense. They're not controlling it very well, but they've got that type of offense. Jonathan Taylor running the football and defense. This is kind of like maybe an Alabama kind of team that runs the ball and defends and plays that way toward championships, but something doesn't click right as far as the overall ball security because they're keeping other teams in the game with that many turnovers.
Well, again, I think that goes to the type of competition that they're playing against. Good competition is going to make you pay for turning the ball over, and unfortunately, again, in being in the Big Ten West, they're not being challenged enough by good offenses that can take advantage of those turnovers. So right now, Wisconsin is kind of skating by on the fact of their lack of strength of schedule.
All right, well, let's put it to it again because we talked last week and you said Wisconsin had no chance to make it in the college football playoff. Now we get one of these wild weeks of college football that we all know and love. The ranking's going to come out later tonight and Wisconsin's going to be hanging right around there. You want to take back any of those words a little bit?
No, I do not. I still think Wisconsin is a great team. I think they're very well coached. Again, I think their strength of schedule is going to hurt them, but I do see them kind of sitting right outside, maybe at 5. But again, I don't know if you can penalize a team that's undefeated, but we'll know more about Wisconsin against Michigan. We'll know more about Wisconsin in their last game. If they can run the table and win the Big Ten championship, then of course they're in.
Well, we'll find out some reactions live to Wisconsin's ranking. Tune into the SEC Country page. You can check out the Push to the Playoff presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Get live reactions to where Wisconsin's ranked, where the top 4 teams sit when the rankings do come out later on this evening. But for now, we're going to talk about stock up, stock down in the Big Ten. Whose stock is rising? They talk about playing for championships in November. And some of these teams right now are pushing into that championship mode. Now, some of them are not pushing into that championship mode, but we'll start with the Michigan Wolverines. 3 wins in a row. Is their stock truly up, or is this kind of a fool's gold situation?
I'm cautiously optimistic about my Wolverines because, again, they have not played against great competition. Their wins have been over Minnesota, Rutgers, Maryland. Those have been their last 3 impressive wins, really. But listen, they've been running the ball well. They've been controlling the ball. Brandon Peters, again, you don't need him to be a world beater. You just need him to be a game manager and not turn the ball over. But again, we'll know more about what Michigan really is against Wisconsin and, of course, in the game against Ohio State.
Well, we're all looking forward to that one. And starting with the Wisconsin game, just sticking on Michigan for 1 second, do you think that they've shown enough from Brandon Peters at quarterback that they're going to have a balanced offense when they go up against that stout Wisconsin defense this week?
They're going to have to. Because I can tell you one thing for sure: Wisconsin is going to stack the box. They're going to try to make Michigan a one-dimensional team. They're going to make Brandon Peters and Jim Harbaugh and that offensive staff throw the ball. So Jim Harbaugh and his brain trust, Drevno and Pep Hamilton and all those guys that sit in the offensive meeting room, they're going to have to come up with more ways, clever ways to get the ball into their playmakers. Of course, Karan Higdon is hurt. We don't know if we'll have him back. We don't know if we'll have Ty Isaac back. I mean, we literally down to our 2 running backs. So we're going to have to see what's going to happen with this Michigan offense.
Another team that stock is rising at this time of the season, and we seem to make this kind of comment every year, is Northwestern and Pat Fitzgerald and the job that he does, admittedly in that Big Ten West, but getting the most out of the least when it comes to the talent that he puts out there on the field.
Listen, Northwestern they are known as the cardiac cats, right? They're always winning games in overtime. They're always winning games that they probably shouldn't win, and they're always fighting. They're always there on the cusp. Pat Fitzgerald, I mean, he's about as solid as a coach there is in the Big Ten. He knows what he has. He recruits to what his team is, to what his university philosophy is. They recruit high character guys, and they get the most out of them.
Do you think that if Pat Fitzgerald was to leave Northwestern, go to another program in the Big Ten or somewhere else in the country, could he keep that up, or is it something specific just about what he has right there in Evanston with Northwestern?
I think wherever Pat Fitzgerald goes, he's going to be successful. And I see him at an institution that is very similar to what Northwestern brings, which is great academics, high character, as well as a good football program. That's the kind of institution I see Pat Fitzgerald at. But he will be successful no matter where he goes, because he's going to recruit the caliber of kids that have a great balance of work ethic and as well as football IQ. So he could be successful wherever he goes.
One more thing before we move on to stock down. Do you ever think Pat Fitzgerald leaves? I mean, his stock we're talking about stock up and stock down. His stock might have been higher than it is right now, but I mean, he always could make that jump if he wants to. Do you think he ever leaves?
I don't think he ever leaves. I think Pat Fitzgerald is the Bill Snyder for Northwestern. I think he'll be there well into his 60s until he wants to leave. I think he's happy in Evanston. I think he likes what he has, what he's built. And I think Northwestern, their administration, I think they like what they have in Pat Fitzgerald. Listen, I think Northwestern, when they look at their football program, it's all about consistency, it's all about high character, and it's all about competing. And I think they do that on a consistent basis. They may not win a lot of Big Ten championships, but what they do is they do it well.
Now, I'm not trying to start any of these coaching carousel rumors or anything like that, but there may be a job opening at Nebraska in the not-so-near future.
I think that job
or
is
the
open
not-so-far
now.
future. For
I
whatever,
think that job is open now.
Accepting candidates there under the new athletic director. But talk about stock down and Nebraska. I think that my statistic is correct on this. The 54 points they gave up to Minnesota, I want to say, is the most points they've ever given up in a conference football game, which is just astounding when you look at that graphic right there. Nebraska 4-6, 6 losses, 3-4 in Big Ten play. It's just odd to see that for Nebraska.
Yeah, I mean, again, Nebraska, a storied, historic program. To see them fall to where they are today is baffling, because they still recruit well. They're still always in the top as far as recruiting rankings. So it's just baffling to see them struggle as much as they have. The only thing that I can think of is, again, coaching carousels hurt programs. And when you're switching coaches in and out every 3 years, there's you give your program no ability to have stability. So, Mike Riley, I think his time is pretty much done. There's a young quarterback at UCF, quarterback coach and head coach in Scott Frost. I really think he's the guy that they should go after.
Well, and he's certainly got that Nebraska track record and the pedigree of offense that I think would be exciting to a lot of Cornhusker fans if they could get a guy like that on board. Two-part question for you in Nebraska before we move on. First off, would they be in better shape under Bo Pelini if he was still there? And second of all, was it doomed to fail with Mike Riley due to his age and his style and the type of recruiting links that he had or didn't have to that part of the country?
I think Bo Pelini is somewhere smiling. I think I said that last week. I think Bo Pelini is somewhere laughing at how things have turned out. I do think they would have been better off under Bo Pelini. Again, when you're switching coaches like that, you take the stability away from your program. And let's face it, Bo Pelini wasn't necessarily doing a bad job. I mean, he still had a winning record while he was at Nebraska. He had some issues, obviously, with fan engagement, right? He got into a couple things with that. And
that was very diplomatically phrased, by the way.
I try.
Issues with fan engagement.
I try my best to be diplomatic like that. But again, I think the program would have been better off. They would have kept Bo Pelini, but he ruffled some feathers, and unfortunately things happened. But now Mike Riley comes in. Do you give him enough time to really get the program the way he wants it? And unfortunately, I think his record is 16-13 or something like that. It's just not good. Not good enough for Nebraska standards.
I want to correct myself on one thing. It wasn't under certainly the current administration at Nebraska, but it was part of that coaching carousel. Bill Callahan, the coach, they gave up 70 points to Colorado in a Big 12 game. So
wow.
That statistic was incorrect about the most in a conference game. I think it might have been most in a Big 10 game then, if I'm not mistaken. And we talked about Michigan's stock being up. Maybe their stock goes up at the expense of Maryland's stock, who has gone down, although maybe due to injury since that season opening victory over Texas. Do we really think that Maryland's stock is down legitimately, or is it more so that they've had some key employees, as it were, been laid off due to injury, so to speak?
You know what? I think it's due to injuries, really. I mean, they're down to their 4th or 5th string quarterback. I think they're probably holding quarterback tryouts right now as we speak. It's really been due to their injuries, and I think it's really hard to kind of judge what Maryland could have been, because they had an excellent quarterback in Taysom Hill. They had, even his backup was a really good quarterback. So once you lose that kind of stability, and now you're playing your 4th and 5th quarterback. Right now, at that point, you're just trying to hold on to the rest of your season. You're just trying to stay alive, and you're just trying to look forward to the future, not really about how you're going to end this season.
Before we move on, talk a little bit about Saquon Barkley coming up here on Land of 10 Live. I do want to stick on one thing on Maryland. Do you agree with me that DJ Durkin is going to work there, that that's a good fit for them? He's a good recruiter. He's an offensive guy. That's an area that's fertile in the country for high school football. I think that's a good choice to be their head coach.
Yeah, I agree. I think DJ Durkin has found a home in Maryland. Again, like you said, it's a great recruiting footprint. A lot of talent in the D.C. area, and I think he's in a situation where the administration really believes in him. They like what he brings to the table. He's energetic. He energizes the fan base. He energizes his players. I think it's a really good fit for Durkin to stay there and not necessarily be enticed by that job opening in Florida.
Hey, before we get to point counterpoint, would you have ever worn one of those Maryland uniforms? Could you put one of those things on? Those things are. Whew.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I could have done that. Maybe the all black. I like the all black uniforms, but the
two-tone helmet,
the thing with the flag, and
hey.
Yeah, I couldn't do it.
Hey. Now, a lot of folks have been shaking their head about the performance of Saquon Barkley over the past 3 weeks. Point counterpoint, here we go. Saquon Barkley, overrated?
No. Saquon Barkley is not overrated. I still think he's one of the most electric players, not just in the Big Ten, but in the country. Now, he was up for the Heisman. He put up some really great numbers, but unfortunately, he's kind of hit a slump. I don't think that's all his fault. At the end of the day, you need holes to run through. You need touches. You need opportunities. And his offensive line has really let him down in this last stretch of the Big Ten season.
I don't always agree with you, but on this, I totally agree with you. Saquon Barkley's not overrated. In fact, I would go so far to say he is a complete running back, like a guy like Le'Veon Bell, and you saw how he took off in the pros. This guy is being ground to the ground right now. I mean, the amount of touches, special teams, and everything else like that. I think it's been a 12-month stretch where a lot of miles have gone on the tires of Saquon Barkley, but assuming that he can get some rest and be healthy, this guy is a star in the making in the NFL.
I mean, how many running backs his size do you see returning kicks and taking them to the house, right? You don't see a lot of guys that play running back that can do that have that ability with his size.
Less than 100 total yards from scrimmage in each of the last 3 games. Ohio State and Michigan State, you can understand. Rutgers, whoops.
Yeah, that was incredible to see that Saquon Barkley did not have over 100 yards rushing against Rutgers. But again, it was really the McSorley show. Again, when you got a defensive front that's playing in your backfield, going to be very hard to find some run lanes. And what Rutgers did, what Michigan could not do, was make Penn State a one-dimensional team, and that's what they did. They completely sold out on the run. They filled their lanes. They contained Barkley, and that's what you have to do against a great running back.
We don't spend a lot of time talking about Illinois football here on Land at 10 Live, although we could talk more about Jeff George Jr. and that little mustache thing that he's got there. Yeah. But today we're going to talk about Lovie Smith. Ooh, I don't know. Have we seen a big enough sample size out of Lovie Smith, or does he need more time?
I think he needs more time. I mean, listen, Illinois is I mean, let's just say it is what it is. It's not an attractive job, right? You're not going to get the top coaches that are just dying to get there to coach, right? So I think you're going to have to give Lovie Smith enough time to really get his guys in there, really rebuild that culture and get those guys to believing that they can win. Lovie Smith, I mean, he's a defensive-minded coach. You would think that's where they would excel at, but they haven't really. I think he needs more time. And unfortunately, in this day and age, with coaching, people don't have patience, right? They give you 3 years to try to turn a program around. But listen, the Big Ten is as competitive as it has been in years. You've got great coaches in the Big Ten. So hopefully they give Lovie Smith at least another year to try to turn things around. If not, then he'll be looking for a job.
Well, I think actually, to take the other side of this one, I think it's enough for Lovie Smith, and here's why to me. I mean, they bring this guy in because of the connections he has to Chicago, which is where you're supposed to be recruiting. I understand that the recruiting's been a little bit better, but it's not even close on the field right now. I mean, when you played in the Big Ten, Illinois was competitive. I mean, now we're dating ourselves here. That's Jeff George Sr. that we're talking about. But they fielded competitive teams. They went to bowl games. This is pretty embarrassing for Illini fans.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an Illini fan, this has been. I mean, for Michigan, they've complained about not, being to the Rose Bowl and beating their rivals, for the last 10 years. So I can really feel how Illini fans feel by not even being competitive. But at the same time, if it's not going to be Lovie Smith, who's it going to be? Who's dying to get there to coach at Illinois?
Well, I mean, that's a fair question, but you look at what some programs have done around the rest of the country where you go with a younger guy. You talked about Scott Frost at University of Central Florida as a good example. Go with a young guy who's got a pedigree. How about Chad Morris at Southern Methodist? I mean, a guy that's got a brand of football that's exciting, or Gus Malzahn at Auburn. Those guys are out there, and I think if Illinois is willing to take a chance on a guy like that, it might pay off for him.
It might. And it might not. Again, when we're talking about coaching carousels, again, the one thing, and trust me, as a former Michigan player, I understand what a bad hire will do to a program more than most people. We went through 2 of them. So again, if you're going to jump on a coaching carousel, you better be prepared and you better have patience and understand now it's going to take that guy another 2-3 years to get his players into the system and implement the system that he wants, because it's going to be totally different from what Lovie Smith now runs.
Now the easy segue from Lovie Smith to 2 weeks before the end of the Big Ten season, predicting maybe the coach of the year. I mean, wasn't that easy of a segue, believe me, because I don't think Lovie Smith has a commonality there. Who'd you give the nod to right now if you had to pick somebody?
Michigan fans are going to hate me for this, but I'm going to have to go with Mark D'Antonio. I'm going to have to go with Mark. I mean, I think given the offseason issues that they've had coming into the season, I mean, they've lost so many playmakers, not only just to the NFL, but to offseason issues. The way he's been able to bring that team together and pull those guys together and get them believing in playing Spartan football, I mean, it's just phenomenal. I mean, most people, I think, have written Michigan State off. And look at the record. Look at what he's been able to do. Now, granted, they just got their doors blown out by Ohio State. But again, I don't think that's a knock on the coaching job that Mark D'Antonio has done. I still think, depending on how he ends the season, I would definitely give Mark D'Antonio Coach of the Year.
Remember when I told you that I don't always agree with you?
Yes.
Yeah, this is one of those instances. Mark D'Antonio just lost the game. What was it, 46-3?
I said in spite of.
Sorry, the Ohio State just added a safety, 48-3. I'm sorry. I mean, how can you go against Paul Chryst and what he's doing with Wisconsin right now? This team is undefeated. He clearly doesn't have a superstar quarterback. He's got a true freshman running back. He's winning with running the football and defense. And right now, he's knocking down every domino that they put up in front of him. This guy's undefeated. How can't you give him the Coach of the Year award?
Well, listen, I like Paul Chryst, and I think he's done a phenomenal job. I mean, he's undefeated. He's getting ready to, he's on the cusp of getting into the college football playoffs. He's done a phenomenal job, like you said, with a true freshman at running back, redshirt sophomore at quarterback, and an outstanding defense. He's very balanced in his approach. But again, I'm going back to what Mark D'Antonio has done under the circumstances his team was under coming into the season. No one expected these guys to do what they've done. At one point before the Ohio State game, I do believe they were up to 12 or 13 in the college football playoffs. That's coming off of a 3-9 season, losing star players, right, under investigation, and to get that team geared up and playing the way that they were playing prior to Ohio State, I think deserves a nod for Mark D'Antonio.
You make a fairly convincing point. How about Coach of the Year in the Big Ten East? Maybe we could both agree on that for D'Antonio.
Then yeah, Big Ten East, West, I give it to Paul Chris.
There you go. All right, see, we found a way to agree. Game you're looking forward to this weekend, obviously Michigan and Wisconsin. What does Michigan need to do to win that game?
You know what, man, again, Michigan is going against a Wisconsin team they're built around their defense. Not enough credit is given to Wisconsin's defense. They are outstanding. They have a nose tackle. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his name because I can't. He's 6'2", 346 pounds. He is going to give Patrick Kugler all he can handle on Saturday. If Michigan can control the line of scrimmage, make this a long, drawn-out game, because this is going to be your traditional smash-mouth Big Ten football, your traditional Wisconsin versus Michigan football game. If Michigan can control the line of scrimmage, get turnovers, because we know Hornibrook will turn the ball over, get some help from your defense, Michigan can win this game, but they will have to play a near-perfect game to get it done.
I mean, low scoring on this one, right? And 3 touchdowns might be enough.
Yeah, what was it last year? 14-13? What was the game last year? It was
really
really close.
About right.
I think it's going to be the same.
Low-scoring ones. But they also, didn't they play that 7 overtime one where they had one of the highest scoring games in the history of college football, too? That was kind of the outlier.
When was that?
That was Brady Hoke, I think.
Oh, well, see, I have amnesia. From Rich Rod on, I have amnesia for that.
How about Penn State and Nebraska? You looking forward to that one maybe for the wrong reasons for Nebraska fans, or a Saquon Barkley bounce back? What do you see there?
Well, I'm hoping that Saquon Barkley can really bounce back from the last few games he hasn't played really well. I'm hoping that he can kind of break out, get back to being the outstanding running back that we've seen in the beginning of the season. And again, if you're a Nebraska fan, you're just hoping to see your guys compete. Just go out and compete. You may not win the game, but just go out and compete and play like you want to be there.
One more loss for Nebraska. I mean, it's probably not even necessary to really say this, but then they're eliminated from bowl contention, which is a crazy statement just in general to say about Nebraska. Not crazy to say that we've had a lot of fun on Land of 10 Live for another week. And not crazy to say, if you flip it over to SEC Country's page, you can check out the Path to the Playoff show, and that one will air at around 9 o'clock to get your reactions after the College Football Playoff Top 4 is announced. It's brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
You saying go blue? You got something for us here?
No, we're not supposed to do that. Remember, we're not. Never mind.
Oh, this is behind the show stuff. I got you. Hey, thanks everybody for making it possible. For Chris Howard, I'm Sam Radin. Thanks a lot for joining us. Land of 10 Live. We're back next week to break down Michigan and Wisconsin.